Rain beat heavily against the old zinc roof that night as a man in torn slippers stumbled into the compound, clutching a plastic bag. His clothes were soaked, his face unshaven, and his eyes carried a quiet sadness that made the gateman look twice. No one recognized him, not even his own wife. "Who are you and what do you want?" Miriam demanded from the doorway, her voice sharp with suspicion. The man raised his head slowly. Under the flicker of the weak bulb, her heart skipped. There was something familiar about that voice when he finally spoke. "Miriam, it's me. It's Tunde." Her scream pierced through the night. The man standing before her, covered in dirt, smelling of the street, was no other than her husband. Tunde Adebayo, one of the richest businessmen in Lagos. But how could the man who owned Adebayo Holdings, who drove cars worth millions, now look like a beggar? Neighbors gathered, whispering in disbelief. Miriam's chest heaved as she stared at him, trembling between shock and anger. "This isn't funny, Tunde. Where have you been for 2 weeks? People said you died in an accident." Tunde said nothing. He looked into her eyes, hoping to see love, or at least concern. Instead, what he saw broke him more than any misfortune could: disgust. "Please, Miriam," he said softly. "Let me come inside. I just need to rest." She hesitated, looked around at the curious neighbors, and hissed under her breath. "You can't come in looking like that. Go around to the boys' quarters. I'll send you some food." Tunde froze. He hadn't expected a royal welcome, but he also hadn't expected this coldness from the woman he'd shared 15 years of marriage with. As he walked toward the back, he could still hear her murmuring, "God, what kind of shame is this? If anyone finds out this man is my husband." That was when he knew the test had truly begun. A week earlier, before this shocking night, Tunde had been a man adored by all. At 51, he had built a business empire that stretched across real estate, oil, and logistics. People called him Olowo ni Ile Eko, the rich man of Lagos. Yet beneath his wealth, he had a nagging fear that his family's love for him was only as deep as his wallet. It started with small signs. His eldest son, Femi, would only visit when he needed a new car or money for a business idea. His daughter Tola once said, "Daddy, you're the best," right after he gave her a credit card. And Miriam, she had changed the most. She spoke to him with the respect due to his money, not to his heart. One evening, while watching a documentary about a wealthy Kenyan man who disguised himself as poor to see who truly loved him, Tunde had an idea, a dangerous one. What if he did the same? He called his lawyer and closest friend, Chief Oladipo. "Dipo, I want to disappear for a while. I need to know if my family loves me for me, not for what I have." Chief Oladipo nearly dropped his phone. "Tunde, are you sure? You have businesses to run. People depend on you." Tunde smiled faintly. "A man can rebuild an empire, Dipo, but a man who loses true love, he's already poor." 2 days later, he faked a car accident on the Third Mainland Bridge. The news spread like wildfire. Billionaire Tunde Adebayo feared dead in ghastly accident. While the nation mourned, Tunde, now in disguise, wearing ragged clothes and growing his beard, watched from afar. He expected his family to grieve, to cling together, to protect his legacy. But what he saw shattered his heart. Within a week, Miriam had locked his room, moved her jewelry to a private account, and started meeting secretly with his business rival, Mr. Johnson. His children fought over property titles. Even his brother Samuel began selling company assets, claiming Tunde would have wanted it. Now standing outside in the rain, Tunde realized he wasn't just testing their love, he was uncovering the truth. He slept that night on a thin mat in the servants' quarters, beside a broken fan that wheezed like an old man. From the window, he saw lights glowing in the main house, where his wife and children laughed over dinner. The laughter stabbed at him, not because they were happy, but because they were happy without him. He thought to himself, maybe I deserve this. Maybe money blinded me from the truth all along. Then something caught his attention. The kitchen door opened slightly. A young maid stepped out, holding a tray of food. She looked around cautiously before whispering, "Sir, Madam said I should give you this." Tunde smiled weakly. But when he lifted the tray cover, his heart sank. A single slice of dry bread and a small sachet of water. He stared at the food, then at the maid. Is that all? The maid looked away. She said, if you're really her husband, then you should start learning how to suffer. Tunde clenched his fists, feeling tears burn behind his eyes. But before he could speak, the maid added, but sir, don't worry. Not everyone in this house has forgotten you. He looked up sharply. What do you mean? She hesitated. Madam's cousin, Miss Grace, she's planning something. I heard her talking on the phone with someone earlier. She said, once we're sure he's not really dead, we must move fast before he ruins everything. Tunde's heart pounded. Grace was the one person he had always distrusted. What was she planning now? As thunder roared outside, Tunde sat alone, cold and betrayed, realizing that the test he created was spiraling into something far darker than he had imagined. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more gripping African folktales like this. What do you think Grace is planning? Comment your thoughts below. Morning came slowly, painting the compound in a dull gray light. Tunde sat on the broken wooden stool in the corner of the boys' quarters, still wearing the same clothes from the night before. His mind raced with thoughts of betrayal, of disbelief, and of fear. He had once trusted Miriam with everything, yet the woman he saw last night was a stranger wearing his wife's face. He decided to wait and observe. He wanted to see who among his family would show genuine concern. For 3 days, no one came. Not his children, not his brother, not even Miriam. Only the maid, little Ijeoma. A kind-hearted girl, barely 20, came every morning with leftovers, sneaking him bread, rice, or beans when no one was watching. Sir, she whispered one afternoon as she handed him food in a small plastic bowl, you have to be careful. Madam and her cousin Grace have been talking. They said someone saw you at Ojulegba begging. Madam told her, if he's foolish enough to live like a pauper, then he's no longer my husband. Tunde swallowed hard. He had hoped Miriam would at least keep his secret if she found out, but it seemed she was already trying to erase him from her life completely. That night, as he sat in silence, he overheard laughter from the main house. Curiosity got the better of him. He crept close to the dining window, peering through the curtains. Inside, Miriam sat in a silk robe, laughing with a tall, light-skinned man. Tunde's jaw tightened. It was Mr. Johnson, his old business rival, the same man he had once caught trying to bribe one of his managers. Johnson, Miriam said sweetly, touching his arm, I told you, I don't want to rush anything. But now that Tunde is gone, we can finally build something real. Tunde's chest constricted. Build something real? His wife was already planning a new life, with his enemy. Johnson smiled slyly. And what about his properties? You said the lawyer hasn't transferred everything yet. Don't worry, she said, sipping her wine. Once I get the death certificate next week, everything will be in my name. Tunde nearly fell backward. His wife was preparing to legally declare him dead. He staggered back to his small room, his heart pounding so fast it felt like it would burst. For the first time, he questioned his test. Maybe this wasn't about love anymore. Maybe it was a warning from fate. But in the midst of despair, one person's loyalty gave him hope. The next morning, Femi, his 25-year-old son, came home unexpectedly. Tunde watched from a distance as Femi argued with his mother in the compound. Mum, I still can't believe Dad is gone. Something isn't right. I went to the crash site myself, and they never found his body. Femi, stop holding on to ghosts, Miriam snapped. Your father is gone. It's time we moved on. But Mum, he insisted, what if he's still alive? What if he's out there needing us? Miriam's expression hardened. If he's alive and hasn't come home, then he's not the man we thought he was. Tunde's eyes welled up as he listened. Femi's voice trembled, a mix of pain and conviction. I don't care. I'll keep looking for him. For the first time since his plan began, Tunde smiled. At least one person still believed in him. Later that day, Ijeoma returned, her eyes wide with fear. Sir, I think Madam knows something. She asked me where I take the leftovers. I lied, but she didn't look convinced. Tunde nodded slowly. You've done enough for me, my dear. Don't get into trouble because of me. Ijeoma shook her head. But sir, she told Grace that if she ever finds you alive, she'll finish what the accident started. The words froze him. Finish what the accident started? Tunde realized then that his fake accident may not have been entirely fake. Someone might have tampered with his car. Someone who wanted him truly dead. Was it Miriam? Or Grace? Or both? That night he couldn't sleep. He thought about how greed could poison love, how money could turn hearts to stone. He remembered the humble beginnings of their marriage, when Miriam used to pray with him every night, when they would eat gari and groundnuts together and dream of a better life. Where had that woman gone? The rain started again, drumming on the roof like distant war drums. He stood by the small window and whispered to himself, if this is the woman I married, then I failed her long before she failed me. Suddenly a knock sounded on the door. It was faint but urgent. Who's there? He asked. It's me, a voice whispered, low, cautious. It was Femi. Tunde's heart raced. Could his son have found him? He opened the door slowly, and there stood Femi, holding a flashlight, his eyes wide in disbelief. Dad, is it really you? Tunde grabbed him into an embrace, tears falling freely. Yes, my son, it's me. Everyone thinks you're dead, Femi gasped. Why did you do this? Tunde sighed. Because I needed to know who truly loves me. And now, I know. Before they could speak further, footsteps echoed across the compound. Femi quickly turned off the flashlight. Voices approached, Miriam's and Grace's. Check the boys' quarters, Miriam whispered. I swear I heard something. Tunde pulled Femi into the shadows. Grace's voice followed, sharp and cold. If that man is alive, we'll find him. He can't ruin our plans. The two women's silhouettes moved closer. The flashlight beam swept across the wall, inches from where father and son hid. Don't breathe, Tunde whispered. The beam lingered, then moved away. After what felt like hours, they left. Tunde exhaled, his hands shaking. My son, he whispered. We must act fast, before they destroy everything. Destroy what, Dad? Femi asked, his voice trembling. Our family, Tunde said quietly, and our souls. If you're enjoying this story, hit the like button and subscribe for more powerful African folktales. What would you do if your loved one tested you like this? Comment where you're watching from. I want to know your thoughts. Don't miss the next chapter. It only gets deeper. The next morning, the compound was quiet. Too quiet. Femi had returned before dawn, sneaking back into his car before his mother woke. He promised to return that night with supplies and to help his father figure out their next move. But for now, Tunde stayed hidden, his mind spinning with plans and regrets. He had learned more in the past few days of poverty than he had in 20 years of wealth. He saw people's true hearts and the darkness that greed could bring. Miriam, once the woman who wept in his arms when they had nothing, had turned cold. Grace, her cousin, was more dangerous than he'd imagined. And the one person showing loyalty, his son, was risking everything. By afternoon, Miriam's voice broke the silence. Ijeoma, she shouted. Come here. Tunde froze. He peered through the crack in the door as the young maid ran out, trembling. Yes, Ma? Where were you last night? Miriam's tone was sharp, almost threatening. I heard noises near the boys' quarters. I was in my room, Ma. The wind blew my window open, Ijeoma stammered. Miriam stared hard at her. Are you lying to me? No, Ma. Grace stepped forward, holding a folded piece of paper. We found this near the kitchen door. It's a note addressed to Tunde. Do you know anything about it? Ijeoma's lips parted. No, Ma, I swear I don't. Then how do you explain this? Grace snapped, tossing the paper at her feet. Someone's been feeding a stranger behind our backs, and I'll find out who. Miriam sighed. Grace, leave her. She's just a girl. I'll handle her later. The women walked back into the house, and Ijeoma, shaking, picked up the paper. It wasn't hers. It was Femi's. Tunde's blood ran cold when she slipped it under his door minutes later. It read, "Dad, I'll be back tonight. Don't move. I have proof that Mum and Grace are working with Johnson to forge your signature on your company transfer papers. Be careful." Femi. Tunde's hands trembled. The trap was deeper than he thought. They weren't just trying to replace him. They were stealing everything he'd worked for. That evening, the mansion came alive with noise. Music echoed through the compound as cars arrived. Tunde peered through the curtain and saw guests dressed in elegant attire. His wife was hosting a dinner party. But it wasn't a celebration of mourning. It was a celebration of inheritance. "Welcome, everyone," Miriam said, her voice carrying across the compound through the speakers. "We're here tonight to honor the legacy of my late husband, Chief Tunde Adebayo, and to continue his work through my new leadership." Applause filled the air. Mr. Johnson stood beside her, smiling smugly. Tunde's eyes burned with tears. His name, his honor, was being sold before his very eyes. But he couldn't act yet. He had no evidence, no support, and no idea who he could still trust beyond his son and the maid. When the guests had gone and silence returned, Femi slipped back through the gate, holding a brown envelope. "I got them," he whispered, showing Tunde the papers. "They forged your signature on every document. Mum even transferred your house into her name." Tunde's lips pressed into a thin line. "Then we must move quickly. I'll need Chief Oladipo. He's the only one who can stop this legally." "But Dad," Femi said cautiously, "if you show yourself now, won't they deny it and accuse you of fraud?" Tunde nodded. "That's why we'll do this the right way, by catching them in their own trap." He leaned back, thinking. "Femi, can you get Oladipo to meet us secretly? Tell him the test went wrong. Terribly wrong." Before Femi could answer, they heard footsteps again. Heavy, deliberate. Ijeoma rushed in, panicking. "Sir, they know. Madam found the note I dropped yesterday. She told the security guards to search every room in the compound. They're coming here next." Tunde's eyes widened. "We have to move now." Femi helped him gather his few things: the ragged shirt, the old slippers, and the envelope of forged documents. But as they prepared to leave, the door suddenly swung open. Grace stood there holding a flashlight and a pistol. "Well, well," she sneered. "The dead has risen." Tunde froze. Femi moved slightly in front of his father, shielding him. "Grace," Tunde said calmly, "I don't know what you think you're doing, but—" "Oh, stop it," she cut him off, raising the gun. "You thought you were smart, didn't you? Disappearing to test your wife. But you forgot. Some of us aren't playing fairy tales. This is real life, Uncle Tunde. And in real life, money doesn't wait for the sentimental." "Grace, please," Femi pleaded. "Put down the gun." Grace smirked. "You're just like your father. Too trusting, too soft." Before anyone could move, Miriam's voice echoed from the doorway. "Grace, what are you doing?" "Finishing what you started," Grace snapped. Miriam stepped forward slowly, her face pale. "I said we would handle it, not kill him." "Oh, come on, Miriam," Grace said coldly. "He knows everything. Once he exposes us, it's over. You wanted freedom? This is it." Tunde stared at his wife, tears welling in his eyes. "So it's true. You wanted me gone." Miriam shook her head weakly. "I didn't want this, Tunde. You don't understand." "Then explain it," he roared, his voice echoing through the night. "Explain why you betrayed me." Grace aimed the gun higher. "Enough talking." The shot rang out, loud and final. Ijeoma screamed. For a second, no one moved. Grace stared, confused, her hand trembling. Then she realized she hadn't hit Tunde. She had hit Miriam. Miriam fell to the floor, clutching her side, her white robe turning crimson. "No!" Grace shouted, dropping the gun. Tunde rushed forward, catching his wife before she fell completely. Her eyes fluttered open, pain etched across her face. "Tunde, I'm sorry." He held her tightly, crying as he whispered, "Why, Miriam? Why?" Her lips quivered, barely forming the words. They said you would never come back. I was angry. I didn't know how to live without—" without your love. Her eyes slowly closed and everything went still. Tunde's world shattered. He looked up at Grace, his face soaked in tears, and said with a voice that carried both pain and fury, "You've destroyed everything." Don't forget to like and subscribe for more intense African stories like this. What would you do if someone betrayed you this deeply? Share your thoughts in the comments and stay tuned because the next chapter will shake you even more. The night air was heavy with the scent of blood and rain. Tunde knelt on the cold floor, cradling Miriam's limp body in his arms. The once proud woman who had shared his life, his struggles, and his victories now lay still, her final breath gone. Femi stood frozen beside him, unable to move, unable to believe what he had just witnessed. Grace stumbled backward, trembling, her pistol clattering to the ground. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to, she stammered, clutching her head. She moved. She was in the way. Tunde's face twisted with rage. You killed her, he shouted, his voice breaking. You killed your own cousin. Grace fell to her knees, sobbing hysterically. Please, please don't call the police. I didn't mean to. She was supposed to. She stopped mid-sentence when she saw the look in Tunde's eyes, a fire she'd never seen before. The quiet, humble man she had mocked now looked like a lion cornered but not broken. Femi, Tunde said in a trembling yet commanding voice. Take your phone. Call Chief Oladipo. Tell him to come immediately and call the police. Dad, wait. Femi hesitated. If they find you here, dressed like this, they'll think you broke in. We need proof. Tunde blinked. He was right. His beard, his ragged clothes, the secrecy of his return, everything made him look guilty. He looked down at Miriam again, tears streaming down his face. Then we'll get proof. Tonight. He stood slowly, his hands still trembling. Grace tried to crawl away, but Tunde grabbed her wrist. You're not going anywhere, he said coldly. You wanted freedom? You'll face what you did, Grace screamed, struggling to break free. But Femi stepped forward, pinning her arm. You're not leaving, he said, his voice low with fury. You've done enough damage. Suddenly, a voice shouted from outside. Madam Miriam! Madam! What's going on? It was the security guard. Grace saw her chance. She kicked Femi hard and bolted for the door. Tunde chased after her, but she was fast. By the time he reached the compound gate, she had already disappeared into the dark Lagos streets. He stood there, panting, drenched in sweat and grief, the sound of distant sirens approaching. Behind him, the lights flickered. Ijeoma stood in the doorway, tears streaking her face. Sir, what do we do now? Tunde looked back at his wife's body and whispered, We do what's right. By dawn, the police had arrived. The compound was swarming with officers and neighbors. Rumors spread fast. The billionaire is alive. His wife is dead. It was the cousin who shot her. Chief Oladipo arrived just before sunrise, his face pale when he saw Tunde. My God, Tunde. Everyone thought you were dead. Tunde's eyes were hollow. Part of me is, he said quietly. They sat inside the parlor, the chaos of the investigation buzzing outside. Chief Oladipo looked at the forged documents Femi had brought. You were right to test them, but this is beyond betrayal. This is evil. Tunde sighed. She wasn't evil, Depot. She was lost. I built an empire so big I forgot to build love inside it. Maybe if I had paid attention, this wouldn't have happened. Chief Oladipo shook his head. You can't blame yourself for someone else's greed. But Tunde didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the window, where the morning sun was just breaking through the clouds. The same sun that had once risen over their wedding day, their first house, their dreams. Femi walked in, holding something. Dad, the police found this near the back fence. He handed over a small brown envelope. Inside were photographs of Tunde's car before the crash, its brakes cut cleanly. Tunde's stomach turned. So it wasn't an accident. Chief Oladipo examined the photos. This means someone tampered with your car before your disappearance. That was attempted murder. And now, murder succeeded, Tunde said bitterly. Grace did both, Femi muttered. We need to find her before she disappears for good. Tunde looked at his son, pride and sorrow mixing in his gaze. You've become a man, Femi, a man I can be proud of. I only wish it didn't have to be through this. There was silence. The sound of police radios crackled in the background. Then, unexpectedly, the officer in charge entered. Sir, he said, we've traced a call Grace made last night to a Mr. Johnson. We believe they planned this together. Tunde closed his eyes. The name still burned like acid. Of course it was him. Chief Oladipo frowned. Johnson's at the top of your competitor list. If we prove he was involved in the attempt on your life, he'll go down for conspiracy and fraud. Tunde stood slowly, his face set. Then let's finish what they started. That afternoon, the city watched in shock as the story broke. Lagos billionaire, presumed dead, returns to expose wife's murder and corporate betrayal. Cameras swarmed the gates of Adebayo Holdings. Johnson tried to flee, but the police caught him at Murtala Muhammad Airport with Grace by his side, attempting to board a flight to Ghana. The footage played across national news stations, sparking outrage. Grace's face was pale as she was led away in handcuffs. Johnson shouted, I didn't do anything. She planned it all. But Grace turned to him with fire in her eyes and spat. You liar! You said we'd be free. Tunde watched from a distance. His heart was heavy, not with victory, but with grief. He had his truth, but at what cost? His wife was gone. His family was shattered. His mansion felt like a tomb. Later that night, as the reporters left and the compound grew quiet again, Tunde stood by Miriam's grave, a small private burial he arranged that same day. I forgive you, he whispered, not because you deserve it, but because I need to breathe again. Femi stood beside him silently, his hand on his father's shoulder. For the first time in days, Tunde looked up at the night sky. The clouds had cleared, and a single bright star shone through. I tested love, he said softly, and I found pain. But maybe, just maybe, pain is the price of knowing who truly cares. What do you think of Miriam's choices? Could you ever forgive someone who betrayed your trust so deeply? Comment your thoughts below, and let's talk about it. If this story moved you, hit the like button and subscribe. More emotional African tales are coming your way. The weeks that followed felt like an eternity for Tunde. Though justice had begun to take its course, the mansion that once echoed with laughter now carried the weight of silence. Reporters camped outside for days, hungry for updates, but he avoided them all. The world saw a headline: Billionaire tests his family, ends in tragedy. But for Tunde, it was far more than a story. It was his life, shattered beyond repair. Femi tried to keep his father strong, but grief clung to them both. At night, Tunde would sit in the living room, staring at Miriam's old chair, the one she loved to sit in during their early years when they dreamed of building a better life. Every now and then, he'd hear her laughter in his memory, soft and hopeful, before greed had swallowed it. One evening, as Femi entered with a file of legal papers, he stopped short. His father was holding a small photo frame. It was their wedding picture, young, in love, with nothing but dreams. Dad, Femi said gently, the lawyer sent the final court documents. Everything's cleared. You've regained full control of Adebayo Holdings. Tunde nodded but didn't look up. And what about Grace and Johnson? They'll both face trial next week, Femi replied. Grace confessed everything. She admitted Johnson bribed her and that the break sabotage was his idea. But she said something else. Tunde turned to him, weary eyes meeting his son's. What did she say? She said Mum never wanted to go that far, Femi said quietly, that she tried to stop them the night of the accident. But they made it look like she helped. Tunde's breath caught. What? Femi nodded. She said Mum only agreed to the fake insurance paperwork because Johnson threatened to expose a private loan she took in your name years ago. She thought she was protecting the family. Tunde sat in silence. For a moment, his anger melted into confusion. So she wasn't completely lost. Femi hesitated. Maybe she was trapped, Dad. I don't think she ever meant to betray you the way it ended. Tunde closed his eyes, the ache in his chest deepening. Then she died with a burden she didn't deserve. He rose slowly and walked to the balcony overlooking the compound. The breeze brushed his face gently as he stared at the city skyline, the very skyline he had fought so hard to conquer. "You can build everything, son," he said softly. "But if you lose trust, you lose the soul of it all." Femi stood beside him, quiet, thoughtful. "So what now, Dad?" Tunde sighed deeply. "Now, we rebuild. But not the company, the family." Days later, the court session began. Grace, pale and trembling, stood in the dock beside Johnson. Cameras flashed as the prosecutor read out the charges: fraud, conspiracy, and attempted murder. Johnson tried to act calm, but when Tunde entered the courtroom, escorted by Femi and Chief Oladipo, his composure cracked. "You planned this," Johnson shouted, pointing at Tunde. "You faked your death just to trap me." Tunde looked at him, his voice calm but cutting. "No, Johnson, I faked my death to test my family. You trapped yourself by chasing what was never yours." The judge called for order, but the crowd murmured. Grace wept quietly, covering her face. When she was asked to speak, she turned toward Tunde. "Sir, I know sorry can't bring her back. I didn't mean for her to die. I was blinded by what Johnson promised: money, power, freedom. But now I see I destroyed everything good I ever had." Her words were broken, trembling with guilt. For a moment, even Tunde's heart softened, but the memory of Miriam's lifeless eyes flashed before him, and he said nothing. When the verdict came, it was swift. Johnson was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Grace received 20 for her part in the conspiracy. The courtroom fell silent as they were led away. Outside, reporters crowded around Tunde. "Sir, how do you feel after this judgment?" one shouted. Tunde paused, looking directly into the cameras. "There are no winners here," he said. "Only lessons. Money can build walls, but love is what holds them up. When love dies, everything else collapses." He turned and walked away. That night, Femi found him in the garden, planting a small flower near a marble stone. Miriam's grave marker. "She loved hibiscus," Tunde said quietly. "Every morning, she'd pluck one and tuck it behind her ear." Femi knelt beside him. "You still love her, don't you?" Tunde smiled faintly, his eyes wet. "Love doesn't die, son. It just learns to live in silence." There was a long pause between them, a silence filled with both sorrow and healing. "Dad," Femi said finally, "I want to help you rebuild Adebayo Holdings, but I also want to do something more meaningful, something that honors Mum's memory." Tunde looked up, curious. "What do you have in mind?" "A foundation," Femi said, "for women who've been trapped in toxic marriages or manipulated by people they trusted. We could name it the Miriam Trust." For the first time in weeks, Tunde's eyes brightened. "That's beautiful. Your mother would have loved that." They stood together under the moonlight, father and son, no longer just bound by blood or wealth, but by shared pain and newfound purpose. A few months later, the Miriam Trust Foundation launched publicly. Women came forward seeking help and hope. Tunde donated large parts of his estate, transforming what once symbolized betrayal into a house of compassion. It was his way of finding peace, of turning pain into power. At the opening ceremony, he spoke to the crowd gathered. "I pretended to be poor to test my family's love," he began. "But what I discovered wasn't just about them. It was about myself. I learned that love, when it's true, survives storms, and when it isn't, it reveals what must be rebuilt." The audience applauded, many in tears. Later that night, alone in his study, Tunde gazed at a framed photo of Miriam once again. "Rest, my love," he whispered. "We both failed, but we both found our truth." Outside, the garden glowed under soft lights, and the hibiscus flowers swayed in the wind, as if she were smiling again, forgiving at last. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more heartfelt African folktales. Would you forgive someone who betrayed you out of fear, not greed? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Your words might heal someone today. 6 months passed. Lagos had moved on, but for Tunde Adebayo, every day was a quiet reckoning. The mansion had been renovated, but he refused to change the old sitting room. Some scars, he told Femi once, remind us where we went wrong. The Miriam Trust Foundation was thriving. Women came daily, widows, mothers, daughters, each carrying their own story of pain and redemption. Tunde spent most days there, sitting among them, listening, offering counsel not as a billionaire, but as a man who had known betrayal and regret. One afternoon, as he sat under the hibiscus tree outside the foundation's gate, a familiar voice called his name. "Uncle Tunde." He turned. It was Grace, thin, pale, wearing a prison uniform escorted by two guards. Her hair was short, her eyes hollow but filled with something unexpected. Remorse. "What are you doing here?" Tunde asked quietly, his voice steady but guarded. Grace hesitated. "They allowed me to visit as part of a rehabilitation program. I needed to see you, to say something." Femi, who was nearby, tensed instantly. "Dad, you don't have to talk to her." But Tunde raised his hand gently. "Let her speak." Grace took a deep breath, trembling. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I know that. I ruined your life. I destroyed Miriam's. Every night in that cell, I see her face. I hear her last words. I can't sleep, Uncle." Her voice cracked, tears spilling freely. "But I also remember how kind she was to me when I first came to live with you. She treated me like a sister. I let greed turn me into a monster. I'm so sorry." The silence that followed was unbearable. The guards shifted uneasily. Femi looked away, shaking his head. Tunde's eyes softened slightly. "Grace," he said, "Miriam forgave easily. That's what made her who she was. If she could see you now, I think she'd say one thing. Don't waste the rest of your life regretting what's gone. Use it to save others from becoming who you became." Grace broke down completely. The guards gently guided her away, but as she left, she turned one last time. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not hating me." When she was gone, Femi looked at his father, speechless. "You forgave her after everything?" Tunde sighed deeply. "Forgiveness doesn't erase pain, son. It just stops the pain from owning you." Weeks later, Tunde received an unexpected visitor at the foundation. It was an elderly man, bent, gray-bearded, wearing a worn cap. He clutched a small envelope. "Are you Chief Tunde Adebayo?" the man asked in Yoruba. "Yes, I am," Tunde replied. "Please sit." The man hesitated before handing over the envelope. "This came from my daughter. She used to work in your house years ago. Her name was Ijeoma." Tunde's eyes widened. "Ijeoma? The maid who helped me?" The man nodded. "Yes, sir. She died 3 months ago. She got sick after moving back to her village. But before she passed, she wrote this for you." Tunde took the envelope with shaking hands. He opened it slowly. Inside was a short handwritten letter. "Dear Sir, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I wanted you to know that I never forgot what you told me that night. That kindness is never wasted. You gave me money to return to my family, and that saved my life for a while. I used part of it to build a small shop for my mother. Please don't blame yourself for everything that happened. I believe Madam Miriam found peace because you still loved her, even after everything. Keep helping others the way you helped me. That's how you'll find peace too. Your loyal servant, Ijeoma." Tunde's hands trembled as he finished reading. He closed his eyes, tears streaming silently down his face. "She was just a girl," he whispered, "and yet she understood more about love than all of us combined." He looked at the old man and said, "Your daughter was brave. Because of her, my life changed. I'll make sure her name is never forgotten." A few days later, the Ijeoma Women's Shelter was added as a branch of the Miriam Trust Foundation. A marble plaque at the entrance read, "In honor of Ijeoma, a humble heart who showed that compassion can bloom even in the darkest soil." As time went on, Tunde began to heal. He no longer carried the heaviness of anger or guilt. Instead, he found purpose in helping others rebuild what life had broken. Every Friday, he hosted a truth circle where people shared their deepest pains, betrayal, loss, heartbreak. He'd listen quietly, then tell his story not as a cautionary tale, but as a lesson about what money cannot buy. One evening, after the crowd dispersed, Femi approached him. "Dad," he said softly, "there's something you should see." He handed him a letter, official looking, from the prison chaplaincy program. Tunde opened it. It was from Grace again. "Uncle, they've shortened my sentence. I'll be out in 5 years. I'm working with the chaplain to help other inmates learn from my story. I tell them how greed can destroy love. I tell them about Miriam and about you, the man who chose forgiveness instead of vengeance. Thank you for not letting me die as the woman I was." Grace. Tunde folded the letter slowly and looked at his son. "Maybe that's what this test was all about," he said. "Not to expose others' hearts, but to change my own." Femi smiled faintly. "You've done that, Dad. You've changed more lives than you realize." Tunde looked out the window. The sun was setting over Lagos, casting a golden glow over the hibiscus garden. He could almost hear Miriam's laughter in the wind again, soft and forgiving. He whispered, "Maybe now I can rest." If this chapter touched your heart, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more deeply emotional African folktales. What lesson do you think Tunde truly learned from his pain? Comment below. Your words matter, and your story might help someone heal too. The morning sun rose gently over Lagos, painting the horizon gold as the sound of birds filled the air. Tunde Adebayo stood by the window of his study, watching the city wake up. The same city that once judged him, pitied him, and celebrated him, now respected him for something far deeper than wealth. It had been 2 years since the tragedy that changed his life. 2 years since he learned that even love, when untested, can wear a mask. But now, as he looked around at the framed photographs on his desk, one of Miriam, one of Femi, and one of the Miriam Trust volunteers, he knew he had found peace, not through revenge, but through redemption. The door creaked open. Femi stepped in, dressed smartly in a navy blue suit. "Dad," he said, smiling. "You ready?" "The governor's already called twice. They're waiting at the event." Tunde chuckled softly. "Since when did you become the one reminding me of time?" "Since you started talking more about the past than the present," Femi teased gently. Tunde picked up his walking cane, not because he needed it, but because he liked the symbol of strength and survival it carried. "Let's go then," he said. "We have something beautiful to celebrate today." The event was grand yet humble. The Miriam Trust Foundation had built its 10th shelter across Nigeria, this one dedicated to supporting widows and single mothers abandoned by families. Journalists, philanthropists, and politicians filled the hall. But when Tunde stepped up to the microphone, the crowd fell completely silent. He paused for a moment, his deep voice calm and resonant. "2 years ago," he began, "I was a man who thought he had everything. Cars, houses, status, money. But I was poor in the things that mattered most. I wanted to test love, but life tested me instead. And it took losing almost everything to find what truly matters." He glanced at the banner behind him that read, "Love Beyond Wealth, the Miriam Legacy." He continued, "I learned that love without truth is a lie, that loyalty built on comfort disappears when storms come, and that sometimes when God strips you of everything, He's not punishing you. He's preparing you to start again with a cleaner heart." The audience was visibly moved. Many wiped their eyes as Tunde raised his hand toward the foundation's new logo, a golden hibiscus flower in bloom. "This flower," he said softly, "was my late wife's favorite. She once told me, no matter how many petals fall, the root can still bloom again." Today, I finally understand what she meant. Applause filled the hall. But among the crowd, one figure stood quietly at the back. A woman in a modest gown, her hair wrapped neatly, her eyes wet with tears. Femi noticed her first and froze. "Dad," he whispered, "look over there." Tunde turned. The woman stepped forward slowly, hesitant but composed. For a moment, time stood still. Gasps rippled through the audience as they recognized her face from old photos. "Miriam," someone whispered. But as she came closer, it became clear. It wasn't Miriam. It was a woman who looked just like her. She approached the stage trembling, clutching a small handbag. "Sir," she said softly, "my name is Chinello. I didn't mean to interrupt. I came because of your foundation. My mother was your wife's cousin." The hall went completely quiet. "My mother used to tell me stories about her cousin Miriam," Chinello continued, tears glistening in her eyes. "How she believed in second chances, even for those who failed her. When she died last year, she told me to find you and to give you this." She opened her bag and pulled out a small locket. "She said Miriam had given it to her long ago, but she wanted you to have it." Tuna took the locket with trembling hands and opened it. Inside was a tiny photo, his and Miriam's wedding portrait, and an inscription that read, "True love never dies, it only transforms." For a moment, Tunda couldn't speak. The audience held their breath as tears rolled down his cheeks. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for bringing her back to me, even for a moment." Chinello nodded gently. "Your story has changed lives, sir. Mine included." He smiled faintly, his eyes glistening. "Then her love still lives on." That evening, after the ceremony, Tunde walked through the garden alone. The air was cool, scented with hibiscus and fresh rain. He reached Miriam's memorial stone and placed the locket on it. "I thought I was testing others," he said quietly. "But in truth, I was the one being tested, to see if I could still love when everything around me fell apart." He looked up at the stars the same way he used to when Miriam was alive. "I failed you as a husband," he whispered, "but I've tried to honor you as a man. I hope that counts for something." A soft breeze stirred, rustling the flowers around him. For a brief moment, he could have sworn he smelled her perfume again. Faint, sweet, familiar. And though he knew it was impossible, he smiled. Maybe she was listening. Behind him, Femi approached, holding 2 cups of tea. "You still talk to her every night?" he asked with a small smile. "Always," Tunda replied. "Some conversations never end, son. They just change form." Femi sat beside him. "You've done well, Dad. You turned pain into purpose." Tunda looked at him warmly. "You're my greatest purpose, Femi. Promise me you'll never let money decide who you are or who you love." Femi nodded. "I promise." They sat in silence, sipping their tea under the soft glow of the garden lights. The sound of distant traffic hummed faintly. The pulse of Lagos life continuing, indifferent yet eternal. And as Tunde leaned back, staring up at the night sky, he whispered one last thought. Not for the cameras, not for the world, but for himself and Miriam. "Love tested me, and I passed, not by winning, but by forgiving." The camera would fade out there, the image of a man who had lost everything, yet gained the one thing no wealth could buy: peace. What did this story teach you about love, betrayal, and forgiveness? Would you have done what Tunde did? Share your thoughts below. Your story might touch someone's heart today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it moved you. More deeply emotional African tales await you right here.